Captain Lee Minute-Ho pressed his hands against the cold metal railing of the bridge as he watched the tactical display. The screen showed thousands of broken ship pieces floating in space like a massive graveyard. This was a Kepler drift, a place where ships came to die. For 300 years, no one had been brave enough or foolish enough to try crossing this deadly space route. The Zenithai Empire had once ruled half the galaxy from this very path between the stars. They had built great cities on distant worlds and moved their massive fleets through this corridor like it was a personal highway. But that was long ago. Now only twisted metal and warning signals remained of their mighty civilization. Lieutenant Park Ji-won looked up from her communication panel. Her dark eyes reflected the blue glow of her instruments. Captain, Earth Command just sent the final approval. We are cleared to begin the survey mission. She tried to keep her voice steady, but everyone on the bridge could hear the worry underneath her professional tone. Minute-Ho nodded slowly. He had read all the reports about this place. Every alien species that had tried to cross the Kepler drift had failed. Ships would enter the debris field and simply vanish. Sometimes rescue teams would find small pieces of hull floating near the entrance, but usually nothing at all remained. Commander Kim Dae-eun stood at her tactical station, scrolling through old military records on her screen. Sir, I have the data from the last attempt. The Altarian Federation sent 3 heavy cruisers through here 40 years ago. Each ship carried over 2,000 crew members. They sent regular reports for the first 6 hours, then complete silence. Search teams found nothing. The captain walked closer to the main viewing window. Outside, space looked normal at first glance. But as his eyes adjusted, he could see the truth. Massive chunks of alien spacecraft drifted slowly past their ship. Some pieces were as big as city blocks. Others were tiny fragments that glittered like deadly stars in the darkness. "Why are we doing this?" asked Ensign Moon Tae-young, the youngest officer on the bridge. "I mean, what makes us think we can succeed where everyone else failed?" Minute-Ho turned to face his crew. These men and women had volunteered for what many considered a suicide mission. Human colonies throughout the galaxy were struggling. The Vorthan hegemony had slowly cut off their supply lines and trade routes. Human ships could only travel through a few narrow passages between star systems, and the aliens controlled most of those. "Because we have no choice," Minute-Ho said simply. "Our people are running out of food, medicine, and basic supplies. The Vorthans want us to surrender, to become their servants. If we can prove this route is safe, we can reach the Outer Rim colonies. We can trade with new species. We can survive as a free people." Chief Engineer Yoon Ha-jin's voice crackled through the ship's communication system. "Captain, all engines are running perfectly. Shields are at maximum power. But I have to tell you, the sensor readings from ahead are completely crazy. The gravitational forces in that debris field should not exist. It's like space itself is broken." Minute-Ho pressed a communication button. "What do you mean, broken?" "Well, so gravity usually comes from large objects like planets or stars. But in the drift, we're detecting gravity wells that seem to appear and disappear randomly. Some are strong enough to crush a battleship. Others might throw us millions of kilometers off course in seconds." The captain looked at his officers. Fear and determination mixed in their faces. They all knew this mission would probably kill them. But they also knew that humanity needed them to try. "The Zenithai were master engineers," said Commander Kim. "Maybe they created some kind of defensive system to protect their territory. When their empire collapsed, the defenses remained active." "Like a trap that never turns off," whispered Ensign Moon. Lieutenant Park checked her instruments again. "Captain, we're approaching the official boundary of the drift. Once we cross that line, we'll be in uncharted space. Communication with Earth Command will become difficult." Minute-Ho took a deep breath. Through the viewing window, he could see ancient warning buoys that still function after centuries. They broadcast messages in dozens of alien languages, all saying the same thing. "Turn back. Death waits ahead. This path leads only to destruction." But humans had always been different from other species. When others saw impossible barriers, humans saw challenges to overcome. When others saw certain death, humans saw a problem that needed solving. "All stations, prepare for entry into the Kepler drift," Minute-Ho announced. "Remember, we're not just exploring this route for ourselves. We're doing this for every human colony, every human child, every human dream of freedom among the stars. The ship crossed the invisible line into the graveyard of empires. Immediately, alarms began sounding as the navigation system detected the impossible gravitational anomalies ahead. Pieces of ancient spacecraft, some still bearing the proud symbols of long-dead civilizations, drifted past their windows like ghosts. Well, Minute-Ho said quietly to himself, let's see if death is ready for humans. Dr. Choi Sun-Mai rubbed her tired eyes and looked at her computer screen again. She had been working for 18 hours straight, trying to understand the strange readings coming from the space around them. The numbers on her screen made no sense according to everything she knew about physics and space travel. Her small laboratory was filled with the quiet sounds of machines analyzing data. 3 other scientists worked at nearby stations, all of them focused on solving the mystery of the Kepler drift. Empty coffee cups and food containers were scattered around the room, evidence of their long hours of work. This is impossible, muttered Dr. Kim Jae-ho, looking up from his gravitational analysis station. These readings show gravity wells that appear and disappear every few minutes. Gravity doesn't work like that. Sun-Mai stood up and stretched her aching back. She walked over to the main display screen that showed a three-dimensional map of the space around their ship. Red dots marked dangerous areas where ships had been destroyed. Yellow dots showed areas of uncertain safety. Green dots showed the few places where they knew it was safe to travel. There were very few green dots. Wait, Sun-Mai said suddenly. She moved closer to the screen and began tracing patterns with her finger. Look at this. The gravity wells aren't random. They follow a pattern. The other scientists gathered around her. Dr. Park Minitsu, the team's quantum physics expert, adjusted his glasses and studied the display carefully. You're right. There's definitely a mathematical sequence here. Sun-Mai felt excitement growing in her chest. After days of confusion and fear, she was finally seeing something that made sense. The Zenithai didn't just abandon this route when their empire fell. They turned it into a weapon to stop anyone from following them. She pressed buttons on her control panel, and the display changed to show energy reading from throughout the drift. These aren't natural gravity wells. They're artificial, created by machines the Zenithai left behind. And look at these quantum signatures. Lieutenant Colonel Jang Woo-bin had been quietly listening from the doorway. As the mission's military specialist, he understood weapons better than space science, but he knew danger when he heard it. Doctor, are you saying the Zenithai deliberately made this place deadly? More than that, Sun-Mai replied, her voice getting more excited. I think they were trying to create a perfect barrier. Something that would stop any enemy from ever reaching their core worlds. But they were too smart for their own good. She manipulated the controls again, and the display zoomed in on a section of the drift where several safe corridors seemed to connect. They built the defense system using quantum mathematics. The gravity wells and energy mines all follow precise calculations, but that means there are safe paths through the danger. Dr. Kim looked skeptical. Safe paths that require knowing extremely complex mathematical formulas. No wonder other species couldn't find them. But we can, Sun-Mai said confidently. Look, the Zenithai use base 16 mathematics for their quantum calculations. Most species use base 10 or base 12 systems. But humans have been working with different mathematical bases for centuries. We can decode their formulas. Colonel Jang pressed a communication button to contact the bridge. Captain Lee, you need to hear this. Dr. Choi believes she's found a way through the drift. A few minutes later, Captain Lee Minute-Ho entered the laboratory with Commander Kim Dae-eun and Chief Engineer Yoon Ha-jin. The small room became crowded, but everyone wanted to hear what the science team had discovered. Sun-Mai explained her findings again, showing them the patterns in the gravity wells and the mathematical sequences that controlled them. The Zenithai created safe corridors, but they are hidden behind complex calculations. If we can solve the math, we can find the safe paths. Chief Yoon studied the technical readouts carefully. Doctor, how long would it take to map these safe corridors? Weeks, maybe months, Sun-Mai admitted. We have to test each section carefully. One mistake, and we could fly right into a gravity well strong enough to tear our ship apart. Captain Lee looked at the display, showing the vast debris field ahead of them. Pieces of destroyed alien ships floated everywhere, silent reminders of what happened to those who made mistakes in this place. We don't have months, he said quietly. Our supplies won't last that long, and Earth Command expects regular reports. Actually, Captain, Chief Yoon said, I think we can do this faster. The debris field itself can help us. Those big pieces of wreckage can serve as shields while we map the safe passages. We can also use some of the larger hulks as temporary bases to store supplies. Commander Kim studied the tactical implications. It's risky, but it could work. We move slowly, test each section, and use the wrecked ships as cover. Sun and I nodded enthusiastically, and as we map more of the safe corridors, we can start to predict where the next ones will be. The mathematical pattern should become clearer. Captain Lee made his decision. Do it. Begin detailed mapping of the safe corridors. Use whatever resources you need. Over the following days, the human ships moved deeper into the graveyard of the Kepler Drift. They tested each section of space carefully, mapping the invisible corridors between the deadly gravity wells. Where other species had seen only destruction and death, the humans began to see possibility and hope. Word of their slow but steady progress began to reach other parts of human space, and beyond to alien civilizations who watched with growing interest and concern. Admiral Beck Insu stood in the command center of the massive space station called New Seoul. The room was filled with glowing screens and busy officers working at their stations. In the center of the room, a huge holographic map showed all the star systems where humans lived and worked. The map was mostly red. Each red dot represented a Vorthan military base or checkpoint. The alien empire had spent months surrounding human space like a giant net. They controlled all the major travel routes between star systems. Human ships could barely move without permission from Vorthan commanders. Insu had been watching the slow strangulation of his people for half a year. Every week brought new reports of human colonies running out of food, medicine, and basic supplies. The Vorthans were not attacking directly. Instead, they were squeezing humanity slowly, like a snake crushing its prey. Admiral called Communications Officer Nam So-young from her station near the back of the room. Her voice was excited, which was unusual for the normally calm young woman. We have an urgent message coming in from Captain Lee Minute-ho aboard the Defiance. Insu turned away from the depressing red display, put it through to the main screen. The holographic map disappeared and was replaced by the tired but smiling face of Captain Lee. Behind him, the bridge of his ship looked busy but organized. Officers were working at their stations with obvious enthusiasm. Admiral Beck, Lee said, I am happy to report that the Kepler Drift is officially navigable. We have successfully mapped safe corridors through the entire route. More importantly, we have established 3 forward supply bases in star systems that were previously unreachable. The command center fell silent for a moment. Then excited voices began talking all at once. Officers who had been worried and depressed for months suddenly looked hopeful. Colonel O'Minute-jun, the station's chief military planner, stood up from his desk so quickly that his chair rolled backward. Admiral, do you understand what this means? If we can move our fleets through the drift, we can completely bypass the Vorthan blockade. We can reach systems they think are impossible to access. Insu felt something he had not experienced in months. Hope. The Vorthans had made their plans based on one simple assumption. They believed humans would behave like every other species in the galaxy. Careful, predictable, unwilling to take dangerous risks. But humans were different. When other species saw impossible obstacles, humans saw challenges to overcome. When others saw certain death, humans saw problems that needed creative solutions. So-young, Insu said, get me an immediate connection to Earth Fleet Command. Highest priority. Minute-jun, he continued, turning to the colonel, I want detailed battle plans for a new operation. Call it Operation Breakthrough. I want those plans ready within 1 hour. The colonel saluted and began working at his planning station. Around the room, other officers started pulling up star charts and fleet positions. The mood had completely changed from despair to excitement. Insu walked back to the holographic display and pressed several buttons. The map changed to show the Kepler Drift route that Captain Lee had just opened. A thin green line now stretched across space, connecting human colonies to entirely new regions of the galaxy. The Vorthans thought they had us trapped, he said quietly to himself. They wanted to cage us in and force us to surrender, but they forgot something important about humans. Commander Lee Hyjin, his second-in-command, walked up beside him. "What's that, Admiral?" "When you corner a dangerous animal, it doesn't always surrender," Insu replied. "Sometimes it fights back harder than ever." Over the next few days, reports began flowing in from Captain Lee's expedition. Human engineering teams were working around the clock to improve the safe corridors through the drift. They were building supply stations inside the hulks of ancient alien ships. They were creating a highway through space that had been considered impassable for 3 centuries. More importantly, human military ships were beginning to move through the new route. Small groups at first, then larger fleets. They were appearing in star systems that the Vorthans thought were safely under their control. The alien empire had built their strategy on controlling all the known routes between star systems. But now there was a new route, one that bypassed all their checkpoints and military bases. Intelligence reports began arriving from human agents throughout the galaxy. Vorthan commanders were confused and angry. Their perfect blockade was falling apart. Human ships were appearing where no ship should be able to go. "Admiral," reported Intelligence Officer Park Sung-ho, "our agent said the Vorthan High Command is in emergency session. They are trying to figure out how we're moving our fleets." Insu smiled. For the first time in months, he felt like they had a real chance of winning this conflict. "Let them figure it out. By the time they understand what we've done, we'll have established permanent bases throughout the Outer Rim." The holographic display now showed Green Dot appearing in sectors that had been empty just weeks before. Human settlements, supply bases, and military outposts were spreading along the new route like flowers blooming after winter. The Vorthan hegemony's perfect strategic position was beginning to look very vulnerable indeed. They had learned it too late that trying to cage humanity was a dangerous mistake. Fleet engineer Ko Young-suk drifted slowly through space in a protective suit, surrounded by the twisted metal remains of an ancient alien warship. The Zenithai dreadnought had been dead for 3 centuries, but now human workers were bringing it back to life in a completely different way. Through her helmet radio, she could hear the sounds of construction work echoing through the massive ship's hull. Welding torches sparked in the darkness as teams of engineers cut new passages and installed modern equipment inside the ancient vessel. "Admiral Beck, this is Ko," she said into her communicator. "The supply depot installation is going perfectly. In 2 days, this old Zenithai ship will be a fully working supply station for our fleets." Admiral Beck's voice crackled back through the radio. "Outstanding work, Engineer Ko. How many stations will that make in total?" 17 completed, sir, with 8 more under construction," Young-suk replied as she guided herself along the ship's outer hull using small jets on her suit. "The beautiful irony is that we're using their own dead ships as a foundation for our supply network. The Zenithai tried to make this place impossible, and now we're turning their failure into our success." The transformation of the Kepler drift over the past months had been incredible to watch. What started as a desperate attempt to find a new trade route had become something much more important. Human engineers and construction crews had turned the dangerous graveyard into the most advanced military corridor in the galaxy. Lieutenant Commander Seo Jin-minute was coordinating all the construction work from his mobile command post, a modified cargo ship that could move quickly between work sites. His ship was currently anchored next to a partially rebuilt alien cruiser that was being converted into a weapons platform. "Ko, this is Seo." His voice came through her radio. "How's the progress on the defensive systems?" Young-suk looked around at construction work happening on dozens of wrecked ships throughout the drift. "Better than we hoped, Commander. We've got 3 more supply stations coming online this week. The defensive platforms are working even better than our computer models predicted." The humans had been very clever in their use of the drift's natural dangers. The same gravity wells that had destroyed so many alien ships were now being used as defensive positions. Human weapons platforms were hidden inside the gravitational anomalies, making them almost impossible for enemy ships to target. The quantum energy fields that had once torn ships apart were now early warning systems. Any hostile ship entering the drift would trigger alarms long before it could reach the human bases. "Any fleet trying to force its way through here will face a complete nightmare," Seo added. "We've turned every piece of debris into a potential weapon." But that nightmare was about to be tested in the worst possible way. Intelligence reports had been coming in for weeks about massive Vorthan military movements. The alien empire was gathering the largest battle fleet anyone had seen in over a century. The Vorthans were angry and desperate. Their perfect blockade of human space had been completely destroyed by the opening of the Kepler Drift. Human ships were now moving freely throughout the galaxy, establishing new colonies and trade agreements with alien species who had been afraid to deal with humans before. Young Suk finished her inspection of the converted dreadnought and used her suit jets to fly toward the nearest human transport ship. Through her helmet visor, she could see the amazing sight that the drift had become. Ancient alien warships, some larger than city blocks, had been transformed into supply depots, weapons platforms, and communication centers. Human ships moved carefully through the safe corridors between them, following the precise navigation routes that had been mapped over months of dangerous exploration. What had once been a graveyard of failed dreams was now a highway of human determination. 3 days later, the Vorthan Armada arrived at the entrance to the Kepler Drift. Intelligence reports said it was the largest alien fleet assembled in decades. Over 400 warships, including massive battle cruisers that could destroy entire planets. Admiral Nounji commanded the human defense from her flagship, the Indomitable. She stood on the bridge watching her tactical displays as the enemy fleet approached the drift's entrance. Admiral, reported her tactical officer, the Vorthan fleet is holding position at the drift boundary. They seem to be scanning our defenses. Through the main viewing screen, Unji could see the massive alien fleet spread across space like a dark cloud. The Vorthan ships were sleek and powerful, designed for overwhelming their enemies through superior firepower. But as the aliens scanned the drift, their formations began to change. Ships that had been moving forward confidently began to slow down and spread out defensively. They are realizing what we've done, Unji observed quietly. This isn't just a route anymore. This is our territory. The Vorthans had expected to find scattered human ships trying to defend an open passage through space. Instead, they found a fortress built from the bones of ancient empires. Every piece of debris had been weaponized. Every safe passage had been turned into a carefully planned kill zone. The alien commanders hesitated at the threshold of the drift, finally understanding that they were not facing a simple human convoy, but an entirely new kind of defensive system. But the Vorthans had committed too much to this attack to retreat now. Despite the obvious danger, they began their assault on the drift. It would be the last mistake their empire ever made. Ambassador Lim Kyung-ho walked slowly into the great chamber of the Galactic Council. This was the first time in human history that their representative would address the council as an equal member rather than a minor species asking for help. The enormous room could hold representatives from over 200 different alien civilizations. Today, delegates from across the galaxy had come to hear about something that should have been impossible. The chamber buzzed with quiet conversations in dozens of alien languages. Many of the representatives looked nervous or confused. Some seemed frightened. Kyung-ho took his place at the speaker's podium in the center of the chamber. Above him, a massive holographic display waited to show images and data to the assembled delegates. He looked around at the alien faces watching him, some with multiple eyes, others with features humans could barely understand. The chamber fell silent as he began to speak. Honored delegates, Kyung-ho said in a calm, clear voice, I am here to report on the recent conflict in the Kepler Drift. The engagement between human forces and the Vorthan hegemony lasted exactly 14 hours. He paused and activated the holographic display. Numbers and statistics appeared in the air above the chamber, showing the size of the fleets involved in the battle. The Vorthan hegemony committed 67% of their total military strength to this attack. They brought over 400 warships, including their most powerful battle cruisers. Of these ships, approximately 8% survived a retreat. A wave of surprise sound swept through the chamber. Delegates whispered to each other in their native languages. The Vorthan Empire had been one of the most feared military powers in the galaxy for centuries. The Altarian delegate stood up from his seat. His people had blue skin and large, intelligent eyes. Ambassador Lim, he said, our military analysts have studied the battle data. Your forces suffered minimal casualties while destroying most of the Vorthan fleet. How is such a victory possible? My own people lost 3 cruisers in that same drift 40 years ago. Kyung-ho smiled slightly. We did what humans always do when faced with something impossible. We refused to accept that it was impossible. The holographic display changed to show the current state of the Kepler drift. What had once been a graveyard of broken ships was now a busy corridor filled with human activity. Supply stations built inside ancient alien hulks glowed with lights and energy. Manufacturing platforms constructed from salvaged materials produced new ships and equipment. Defensive installations hidden throughout the debris field protected the entire route. Other species looked at the Kepler drift and saw failure. Kyung-ho continued. They saw a monument to the defeat of the mighty Zenithai Empire. They saw a place where ships went to die. Dr. Kang Eun, who had been part of the original expedition to map the drift, stood up from her seat in the human delegation area. "But we saw something different," she said. "We saw a puzzle waiting to be solved. The Zenithai had created defensive measures to protect their territory. We turned those same defenses into our infrastructure. Their weapons became our tools." The chamber was completely silent now. Delegates from across the galaxy were trying to understand what they were hearing. Humanity had not simply found a way through the impossible route. They had made it their own so completely that it no longer resembled the death trap it had been for 3 centuries. The representative from the Thorian Collective, a species known for their careful and logical thinking, finally spoke. His mechanical voice was filled with something that might have been respect. "You have turned a symbol of ultimate defeat into your greatest victory. When other species encounter such challenges, they flee or find alternative paths. But you embrace the challenge itself." Kyung-ho nodded. "That is exactly what makes us human. We do not simply survive impossible situations. We master them. We turn them into advantages. And when the next impossible challenge appears somewhere in the galaxy, we will be ready for that one too." The display above the chamber changed again, showing trade routes that now passed through the drift. Human merchant ships carried goods between star systems that had been isolated for centuries. New colonies were being established in regions that had been unreachable. Scientific expeditions were exploring areas of space that no one had visited since the fall of the Zenithai Empire. As the session came to an end, representatives from dozens of alien civilizations sat quietly in their seats, thinking about what they had witnessed. Some were impressed by human determination. Others were worried about what humanity might accomplish next. All of them understood that something important had changed in the galaxy. Humanity had proven that there were no truly impossible barriers. There were only barriers that had not yet encountered human creativity, stubbornness, and refusal to accept defeat. The Kepler drift, which had been the graveyard of empires for 300 years, was now humanity's highway to the stars. And somewhere in the galaxy, other impossible challenges waited to discover what happened when they met humans who refused to give up. The age of human expansion among the stars had truly begun.